very true to form, the Buffalo Bills are still undefeated out of the bye and are still a bit sluggish coming out of the bye. But this season was a little bit different, wasn't it? I'm going to tell you all about it today on the Ralph Rant. Let's go.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant, your source for hard-hitting Buffalo Bills takes. Now, here's your host of the Ralph Rant, that veteran watcher of generations of Bills teams, the prophet who predicted Josh Allen's greatness, that opinionated so-and-so you've walked out on parties because of. The Ralph.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant. I am your host, The Ralph. Thank you ever so much for being here. Today's episode is Takes on the Tape, where I'm going to tell you about what I saw on the All-22 game film from the Buffalo Bills' visit to the Carolina Panthers yesterday, October 26th. Now, before I get into it, thank you again to all the new subscribers and viewers we've had of the channel. There's been a lot of great comments, and certainly we have taken that subscriber count up to well into the 900s and hoping to get to 1,000 very soon. So indeed, if you're not part of the channel yet, please take the nanosecond required to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And of course, like the video, and most of all, please comment, because your comments are a great inspiration for what we do here on the Ralph Rant. But for today's episode, what we're going to talk about, first of all, is sluggish post by Josh, because that was really the only sluggishness I saw in the Bills yesterday, but I'm not too worried about it, and we'll talk about that a bit. Then we'll get into hot cooks. James Cook, of course, having a career day, setting a Buffalo Bills single game record that was broken yesterday and had been set back in 1976. And then we'll get into one of my favorite players on the defense right now, Michael Hoecht, who is absolutely stunning for what I think he's done so far, and he's demonstrating a hostility, and I've got a quick clip in there for you that you will enjoy. And then we'll move on to the defense at large and talk about the upgraded grades I've got for them, because the defense was good in terms of stopping the run and definitely defending the pass, and there's some new people on the field, especially including our free agents, Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoecht. Maxwell Hairston, who made his debut on an NFL field yesterday, not even having played in the preseason for that matter. That was his very first NFL action, and he acquitted himself very well. So we're going to talk about maximizing Maxwell. So let's get into them all and blow the horn and go. All right, let's get right into it. As I said in the cold open, certainly the Bills are undefeated coming out of the bye, and yet they've displayed some sluggish tendencies doing so. But yesterday, the only really sluggish aspect I saw from the Bills was that of Josh Allen, who perhaps was worried maybe about losing that third consecutive game, which he's never done as a pro, perhaps losing two in a row, which of course the Bills have done before with Josh Allen, but there's always been a next week to be able to get right back on the horse. There wasn't, of course, in this case with the bye. So I'm going to go through what I saw pretty quickly, and the first thing I'm going to mention is that I saw Josh leaving clean pockets a couple of times, especially early on in the first couple of drives, and it was always with him rolling out to his right and escaping pressure that I didn't see. And not that Buffalo has receivers that are getting space and getting open every single play, but his rolling out like that certainly limited the options, and there were some chances to throw the ball to the left side of the field where he lost access to by going far right. And of course, we saw him complete one of those nearly to, actually it was caught by Elijah Moore, but ruled out of bounds. So that was difficult to see on him leaving those clean pockets. The other thing I saw were some turn downs, and that would be him seeing an open receiver, which of course was not often, but he did have some open receivers that he looked away from and went the other way. One notable example of that is when he threw to the left, and it was short and outside of Ray Davis, who didn't catch the ball. If you look at the film on that very play, he had Tyrell Shavers pretty much wide open, and he would have caught the ball perhaps standing right on the number 10 of the 10-yard line on the right side of the field. Josh did not see him or chose not to take that. And then there was a couple of other turn downs I noticed, but it wasn't all Josh either. Certainly one of his first passes to Dalton Kincaid was a pure drop right off the hands of Kincaid, should have been caught. And of course, when you're trying to get into a rhythm, those things can be difficult to start off the game. Now, of course, I believe confidence actually equals accuracy, and I attribute a lot of this, again, to the fact that there was the 2 losses and then the 2 weeks to think about it, actually 13 days because the last one was on a Monday night. But there was a long time to think about those, and certainly Josh has been a state of mind that we've noticed with, of course, the interview that aired before the Atlanta game. But I think he's going to get it together, and I also think that a lot of what happened yesterday, of course, would have perhaps been different if James Cook hadn't been doing so well. There was some very good things, though. He certainly threw with authority and quickness to Dalton Kincaid down the field for that early completion, 23 yards. He hit Coleman on a slant very quickly, and also the throw to Khalil Shakir on his touchdown ramble that he got away from a couple of tackles and went the distance for about 54, 55 yards. That was a very decisive throw and good to see. So those are in there. But again, I think with the fact of Josh having seen how well James Cook was doing, why not stick with that? Because certainly the old adage in the NFL is run and stop the run, and Buffalo definitely did that in terms of the running, and we'll talk about the run stopping a little bit later. He had a couple of misfires also, and there was one throw that looked like it might have been intended for Kincaid. Kincaid was looking over the wrong shoulder for it, but that might have been tipped at the line. I slowed down that film. You really could not see the ball wobble or anything, but a hand was up there, and the ball was definitely short of where I think he was going, which would have been to Khalil Shakir. And some other situations with receivers that didn't help him out. But generally, Josh did not get into a rhythm. I'm attributing that to him taking the Bills' sluggishness out of the bye on his shoulders, but I think we'll see it a lot better. There was not sluggishness in other areas, and we'll get into it and talk about it right now because James Cook was cooking. It's becoming a bit cliche to say James Cook was cooking, and it's fun to say, but quite frankly, James Cook was more on fire yesterday against the Carolina Panthers. His 216 rushing yards broke a record for the Buffalo Bills for a single-game rushing total that dated back to 1976. In addition, the Carolina Panthers had not allowed more than 140 total rushing yards to any opponent thus far this season. And the Bills rushed for 245 in total, that being with the James Cook's 216 yards, obviously. And the thing I noticed about Cook, who was mostly running out of zone schemes, meaning that in a zone scheme, the offensive line is generally all moving in the same direction, and the idea being you want to get cutbacks and find those holes to slice through. I did not see too much in the way of any gap schemes, pin and pull, what have you. And instead, it was mostly zone. And oftentimes, I saw James Cook demonstrating a great deal of patience in looking at those holes. It seems to me his vision is actually getting better and is catching up, certainly, with his quickness and his speed and his ability to cut. And, of course, the line was awesome, as it always is, blocking. But moreover, you've got to give a shout out to Reggie Gilliam and, of course, Jackson Hawes, but especially Gilliam, who, of course, set James Cook free with his block on number 32, Wallace, who had been harassing Josh all day. Well, Reggie Gilliam got a great block on him, and James Cook was untouched on that touchdown ramble. And other than that, James was getting quite a bit of yards even before contact, and then he seems to be able to just slither through spaces. And, of course, this was against a team that, like I said, has been doing great against the rush. So I'm looking very much forward to seeing James continue like this. I like the fact that it takes the pressure off of Josh Allen. But sometimes I worry that James Cook was so good that there was really no pressure on Josh to do much of anything. And sometimes maybe he needs some pressure. And we saw Josh trying to get into a rhythm, but James Cook was definitely into a rhythm, and got to commend him for that, and hope to see more of that next week when the Kansas City Chiefs, who are coming to the Ralph, will face James Cook. Let's be happy about that, and let's move on. Bills free agent Michael Hoecht saw his first action with the Bills yesterday versus Carolina. You want to know what I think of Michael Hoecht?
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility.
Guys, that is the most hostile Buffalo defender I think I've seen in a long time. And he looks very dangerous. You can tell just the angst and the nastiness that this guy has on every single play he's out there. And what interests me a lot is the way the Bills are using him, the way Ryan Nielsen is employing him. And we saw him in so many different positions. We saw him lined up as a defensive end, as an edge player. We saw him lined up in the middle. We saw him lined up like an outside linebacker without his hand in the dirt, standing up. We even saw him standing up in the middle, and I even saw him at one point standing up basically in the edge position and threatening the rush, but backing off and dropping into coverage, and he immediately sent to the unemployment line a Carolina offensive tackle, their left tackle, because he was waiting for Hoecht. Hoecht wasn't there, and that guy did nothing on the play. And in the meantime, the Bills got some good pass rush. The way Hoecht is able to attack from these different spots and threaten from these different spots, I think is going to create an undercurrent for the Bills to get this Ryan Nielsen scheme of doing a lot of stunts in games and disguises with the defensive line more in place. And I also think Michael Hoecht's hostility is rubbing off on some of the rest of the team. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. But I just believe that he is going to be great for the Bills. He had a number of sack opportunities. I believe he had a strip sack. He had a couple of other sacks. He had tackles for loss. And I just could not be more pleased with what we're seeing out of him. And I hope it progresses, and certainly hope it continues with aplomb next week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But welcome Michael Hoecht to the Buffalo Bills. Your structural perfection is only matched by your hostility. I love it. That was, without question, the best we've seen the Buffalo Bills defense play all season. And of course, this was against a team that actually had been running the ball quite well, a team that was 4-3, that had actually one more win than the rest of the Buffalo Bills opponents against whom they won amassed by the time those opponents were through the Bills. I think 3-24 was their mark. Of course, the Panthers were 4-3. The Panthers also had a very good running game, a two-headed punch with both Chuba Hubbard as well as Rico Dowdell, and they were on hand to try to do that to the Bills. It didn't happen, and why? Well, of course, we talked about Michael Hoecht just a moment ago in terms of his hostility on the defense and the different positioning and the confusion that some of his movement created. And I think we're going to see more of that from Ryan Nielsen as we go along here. And certainly Larry Ogunjobi being part of the mix now. And our edges, Joey Bosa and Groot, looked great. I saw a lot from them in terms of the ferocity and the attack and the speed and pursuit of the ball. Groot, of course, had the great forced fumble on Dalton down deep in the Bills' end that was recovered by Benford. And then, of course, A.J. Epinesa on the play immediately following Ed Oliver's injury goes and gets the knee boink interception, basically tipping Dalton's pass with his hands. I think it might have gone off his helmet, went down. He pops it up with his knee, grabs the ball, and heads towards the end zone. Too bad we didn't get a score for him there. Down at the 1, the Bills went in and scored. And that was a great thing to see because it helped the Bills really in that middle eight situation we always talk about, last 4 minutes of the first half, first 4 of the second half, especially when the Bills were getting the ball in the second half. And in addition to that, the other thing I think we saw that was remarkable was certainly a second level of the Buffalo Bills playing well. And it's kind of interesting to say that because, of course, both Terrell Bernard, who was dressed but only for an emergency situation, did not play, and also Matt Milano was out. And who did we see? Well, we saw a lot of Shaq Thompson. We saw a lot of Dorian Williams. We even saw Joe Andreessen out there. And I saw guys triggering. I saw thumping style linebackers like I've talked about in the past. And we saw guys actually getting into gaps. The gap integrity, of course, was far better. I think Dowdell only got loose for one significant run of maybe 12 yards or so. But other than that, the Bills really stymied the running game tremendously. And that's interesting, again, when you consider the fact that that second level was made up of players that really aren't our starters. But I think it still goes back to what's going on with the defensive line and the confusion that was created by the presence of Michael Hoecht and some else of what was going on. And then certainly we had some good safety play from Poyer was out there to start, and also in the secondary, of course, we had Trey White starting. But I think we saw some good play from them. We saw Jordan Hancock get out there also. We saw Cam Lewis in some dime situations. But the Bills did quite well. There were a few situations where the ball was thrown by Andy Dalton, but he was a little bit inaccurate. Perhaps those are going to be catches otherwise. Although I've been watching a little bit of Patrick Mahomes tonight, he didn't look much better. But in any event, I think we saw a Buffalo Bills defense that is really coming together. And certainly you've got to question why Taylor Rapp was out there so long with a knee injury and finally gets put on IR. But he was being exposed for some time. And I took exception to the notion that he was regressing. And indeed, that wasn't the case. The guy was just injured. I believe he'll be back and be fine. But they're really happy about the defensive performance we saw. I don't know if I have any other notes here in particular on what we had going on, but just basically the big one being the fact that the defense was able to have people inspired. There was a lot of gap integrity in place. I guess McDermott had that talk with them, and I just saw a ferocity and hostility from the Bills that I had not seen previous. Perhaps they watched a couple of my past vids. We can only hope. Moving on. Certainly we cannot talk about the defense, although we just did, without mentioning Maxwell Hairston. And I believe the Bills are well on their way to maximizing Max. We were all probably kind of shocked, surprised, pleasantly surprised, but outright surprised that the Bills opted to put Maxwell Hairston on the 53-man roster. Of course, at the beginning of the week, he was opened up for his 21-day practice window coming off IR, and the expectation was that, they'd let him get calloused up in practice for a couple of weeks and then maybe get on the field in Game 9 or Game 10. Well, that wasn't the case. And of course, I think I know why, because Max Hairston was drafted specifically for the purpose of neutralizing and making unworthy Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Bills need to be able to stop the speed on the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And Max appears like he's going to do that. And although we would have expected him perhaps to come out with speed and being all over a receiver, and we saw all of that, but the first thing we saw was him coming in and making a stick tackle on the far side, on the defensive right side, and getting the grill of his face mask in there and hitting a guy with some ferocity. I really like to see that. And of course, it's fascinating that you would see a guy get out on the field like that. In his very first ever NFL action, he didn't even see a single snap of preseason. In fact, he really hardly saw anything even in training camp, having gotten injured right after the start of training camp, I believe on July 29th. So congratulations to Max Hairston for getting out there. And in terms of everything I saw on film of when he was out there, and of course he was on a bit of a pitch count coming in for Trey White, but of course there was the good stick tackle, but I did not see a single receiver get by him, and he looked like he was making his proper decisions, obeying his coverage rules, and staying on the guy he should have. We did not see a case of a wideout for the Panthers running free with no one around him. And goodness, how many wideouts from the Bills' past two opponents have we seen running free with no one around them? So I think Max is going to be fine. He's going to be a great addition. I think he got a lot of good experience, and I think this will make a huge difference this next week against the Chiefs. And especially if the Chiefs are playing anything like I've seen them play, at least in the first half tonight against the Commanders, Buffalo ought to do all right in that game. So congratulations again to Max Hairston. Congratulations to the Bills and their big win. I think Josh will get it together, and I think the team definitely showed some attitude. Sean McDermott can give me a quick note or a call on the side to let me know how thankful he is for the inspiring videos I did talking about the spirit of this team last week. So, again, this has been the Ralph Rant. Thanks again for watching. I urge you to take the nanosecond, like I said, it takes to subscribe to the channel. And please like the videos if you can, but definitely give us your comments because they are an inspiration. So with that, I bid you goodbye until our next show in the middle of the week, and who knows what we'll be talking about. But until then, be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills. I am the Ralph, and this is the Ralph Rant. Out.